And almost ready. Just organizing all of my different technology bits.
Hey, Rabbi.
Yes.
Have you ever seen anybody have success with any of those language learning apps or no?
Well, we've talked about this before. It's, they are a great supplement to, a face-to-face instruction or live instruction. It's just they need to be done with a more rounded program. Right. I mean, from what you sent me earlier today, you've clearly put in a lot of time, and I have to imagine you've made benefit. You have had benefit from it. It's just, it would be even more if you were actually using the language, either written, spoken, or in reading in some other constructive way, and had a regular interaction with somebody who could guide you.
Yeah, when I enroll on Fridays, I don't know most of the words.
Well, that's the other issue, is that if you're reading, if you're using the language learning to become more fluent in the Siddur, then something that's designed for teaching modern Hebrew is not going to be very helpful.
Some of the Mishnah words I think I know sometimes.
Some of the Mishnah words will come up a little bit more because the Mishnah deals with regular life. It just has a slightly different vocabulary than modern Hebrew in some places. But the Siddur has a unique set of vocabulary. It's not especially large. It's just very focused on a particular set of things. And then, of course, on Friday night, you have the added complexity of the Psalms, which, at the beginning of Kabbalat Shabbat, adds a whole nother layer of linguistic difficulty, the same way that if you had Shakespearean sonnets in English, if somebody was learning English, that would be an extra wrinkle.
All right. Thanks, Rabbi.
All right. Well, I think we have used our normal buffer for people to log in. So let's go ahead and get the show on the road. Chapter 9. Chapter 9 is our final chapter, but it's going to have two main themes. We're going to go through our first theme tonight, and we'll save the second theme for next week for the end. It's also a very appropriate final theme for the end of the holiday of Hanukkah, or near the end. This first theme is going to focus on the topic of Eglah Arufa, which is the broken neck cow. If you are familiar with the book of Deuteronomy, this will be an old friend. If you're not, well, we're going to start with a little detour, which is to say we're going to take a look in Devarim, in this section, in chapter 21, to see what in the world is being discussed here. Because if you're not familiar with this piece of text, the Mishnah's explanation of it, which will be quite in-depth, is going to make no sense. So, quick review of the Torah passages. Chapter 21, the book of Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy. If in the land that the Lord your God, have to admit someone else to the room. If in your land that the Lord your God is assigning you to possess, someone slain is found lying in the open, the identity of the slayer not being known, your elders and magistrates shall go out and measure the distances from the corpse to the nearby towns. So what we are dealing with here is the case of a murder, a person having died in the middle of nowhere, and we are not sure who committed the crime. Right? Those are important pieces, as we're going to see. And if that happens, then you measure and find out what the closest town is. The elders of the town nearest to the corpse shall then take a heifer which has never been worked and which has never pulled in a yoke. Right? So this is a fresh young cow that's never been used for any purpose and benefit. And the elders of that town shall bring the heifer down to an overflowing wadi, which is not tilled or sown. There in the wadi they shall break the heifer's neck. So they're going to bring the cow down to this Nahal Etan, which we'll talk about in the Mishnah. And that's where they're going to break the neck. And then there will be a declaration. Right? And that is exactly, in the next section, as we're going to see, why that declaration is because of the declaration is why we're here. Aaron, you got a question so far?
Yes. It seems like they don't want a cow that's been worked and they don't want land that's been worked. Is there a reason for that?
So in general, the whole idea here is that you are giving up something that is potentially usable in a way that is going to be seen as completely unbeneficial to you. Right? The land has not and will not be tilled. The cow has not and obviously will not be used. So therefore, this is a complete waste. This is a complete sacrifice in the English sense of the word. It's not a korban in the Hebrew sense. And that means that there was no benefit to the town from having done this ceremony.
Is there a reason why you can't give up something that you get further benefit from? You just can never have benefit altogether. They want it to be a complete waste.
Exactly. Right. If you've already gotten some benefit, then you'd use the cow that was going to die anyway. If you wanted to get some benefit, then you'd use the land that had already been used up. So instead, they're trying to make sure that both the cow and the land are something that are pristine, and therefore is the maximum loss for this occurring.
But it doesn't talk about no blemish.
We'll get to that in the Mishnah. Okay, so the priests, sons of Levi, shall come forward, for the Lord your God has chosen them to minister him and to pronounce blessing in the name of the Lord, and every lawsuit in case of assault is subject to their ruling. Then all the elders of the town nearest to the corpse shall wash their hands over the heifer whose neck was broken in the wadi, and they shall make this declaration. This is, of course, why we are using this at the end of the Mishnah Sotah, because as long as we're talking about declarations that have to be done in Hebrew, and this is one of them, then we might as well include some of the extra halacha that go along with them. Our hands did not shed this blood, nor did our eyes see it done. Absolve, O Lord, your people Israel, whom you redeemed, and do not let guilt for the blood of the innocent remain among your people Israel, and they will be absolved of blood guilt. Thus you will remove from your midst guilt from the blood of the Lord of the innocent, for you will be doing what is right in the sight of the Lord. So this whole ceremony is meant to be used for this case of anonymous murder as a way of absolving the community of the guilt that is hovering, if you will, almost personified, anthropomorphized, looking for who to lash out to. The blood of the guilt, the blood of the slain is looking for someone to blame. And this ceremony is meant to basically say, we are not responsible for this, right? Even though we are the closest town, we were not responsible for this. This topic will come back in more detail in the Mishnah. But I wanted to make sure that you saw the basic structure of the mitzvah that the Mishnah is going to be analyzing. So any other superficial questions, because like I said, the Mishnah will analyze this in more detail. I just want to make sure the general outline is clear.
Can you show me, Rabbi, the beginning, because I arrived 1 minute late and you already started?
So the beginning is chapter 21, verse 1. Right, this is about the anonymous body that's found, and they don't know who the murderer is.
So what is the distance from the town that the body should appear?
So you have to measure between the towns that are nearby to find out which town is closest.
Okay. And they need to bring an cow
Right, exactly.
to sacrifice,
Well, not to sacrifice, to
to kill.
kill.
And what they do with the meat?
Nothing.
They throw the meat.
It is just, yeah, it is completely wasted.
And and this way they clean the conscience.
Well, we'll talk about what they're trying to clear when we get to that in the Mishnah.
And who pay for the cow?
The town.
The town, with taxes. Okay.
Well, technically, sorry, Safari had jumped in back to chapter 8. It likes to do that on my computer for some reason. All right. So let's analyze this in more detail using the text of the Mishnah. The declaration over the heifer whose neck is to be broken must be in the holy tongue. As it is said, if a corpse is found on the land, then your elders and judges shall go out. Right? So we know it's in Hebrew. It's parallel, says the Gemara, to the declaration of the curses that we saw in the earlier talks of language or things that must be done in the language of Hebrew. But now we're going to focus on the elders and judges going out. 3 used to go out from the high court in Jerusalem, meaning 3 elders, 3 judges from the high court of Jerusalem. Rabbi Yehuda says 5, as it is said, your elders and your judges, which is 2 of each because each is in a plural form. And since there cannot be a court of even numbers, they add 1 more to round it up to 5. Yes, Aaron?
Is the high court the Sanhedrin?
Yes, that is a synonym for the Sanhedrin. All right, so they go out to make the initial investigation. Right? These are not the elders from the town because we haven't established which town is closest. These are the elders, the judges that are determining which town is closest, and then elders from that town will do the other parts. But first, we have to qualify under what circumstances this happens. If the corpse was found buried underneath a heap of stones, or hanging on a tree, or floating on the surface of the water, they would not break the heifer's neck, as it is said, in the earth, meaning not beneath a heap, not hanging from a tree, and of course, in a field means not floating on the surface of the water. So the rabbis are reading very strictly, the same way that when they were reading the laws of Sotah itself regarding the suspected adulteress, they narrowly construe the language to minimize the number of cases, the circumstances in which this might be applied. So here, a body that is found in any one of these other ways does not qualify for this ritual, and therefore the ritual is not carried out. Natan, were you about to say something?
Sorry, yeah. But what happens if someone kills someone and throw him or her on the river?
Then you do not. Then you do not do
body, and maybe the town, yes, is responsible because they're here on the land, not on floating on the river or anything. But what happens if they try to disappear the body in that way?
Right. So thank you for bringing this up because we'll talk about this in more detail later in the chapter. But it's important to realize from the beginning, the rabbis are not saying that the guilty murderer should not be hunted down. If there's any way at all to find out who the murderer is, they pursue it. If there are any clues, any evidence, anything that will lead them to the murderer, they track them down. In the meantime, however, they have the question of whether or not to perform this ritual. And that's what they're dealing with here. And in this moment, presuming no murderer has been found and accused, they are asking, do we perform the ritual of breaking the neck of the heifer if the body is not found in the precise way that the language of the Torah seems to indicate it needs to be found? Now, the question is, and this is sort of the meta question, does the ritual itself need to be done because it has a metaphysical good that is brought to the community and the world? Or is the ritual done only for the sake of the community when it is absolutely necessary to do. And if it's not necessary to be done, then there's no reason to do it. There's no additional benefit that you would say, well, let's be strict, and even though it was on the water or even though it was hanging from a tree and doesn't meet the official criteria, let's do it anyway because there's some additional metaphysical benefit. The rabbis here are leaning, it seems, towards the idea that if it doesn't meet the strict criteria, that there is no benefit to be gained from interpreting this text broadly, and instead they would say, do not perform the ritual in these circumstances. Now, that's going to come back much more importantly, partly tonight, but even much more when we get to the second half of the chapter next week. So hold on to that question of why are we doing this? I know that I deliberately anthropomorphized the blood guilt as something that was hunting for a community to punish for the crime of the murder, because that's the way that many people will read that section of Deuteronomy. What we're seeing here in the words of the rabbis is a rolling back, a stepping back from that type of anthropomorphism of the blood guilt, and instead sanitizing, making it a very technical process, the same way that they neutered the Sotah ritual from the way many people initially read it to be implying that any jealous husband could force any woman at any time to go for the ritual. They put that within a strict construction that limited when it could be applied, again, in their mind, and I agree with them, based upon the Torah text rather than a casual reading. And they are doing the same here. But we do need to recognize that sometimes the rabbis will read language and broaden its interpretation, and sometimes they'll read the language and narrow its interpretation. So there is definitely room for it to have gone the other way, but the rabbis are saying here, it seems to be that it is in the interest of correct interpretation and correct service of the community not to perform the ritual unless it meets the precise conditions laid out in the Torah.
So you say that they try to narrow the use because there's not any benefit to the community in applying the ceremony very often.
Well, so I'm saying that we need to look at potential reasons why they might have narrowed it, right? So one reason is that in contrast to the metaphysical view, the mystical view that the blood guilt is stalking, looking for somebody to punish, is to say that it's only done when it's done. The other reasons of why they might have narrowed it.
Only done when it's done, sorry.
So, meaning that it's when it's proper to do, it's proper to do. And if it's not proper to do, you don't need to do it. But another way of looking at it is to say, when it needs to be done, it needs to be done. And when it doesn't need to be done, you are forbidden from doing it. Right? There are certain things that we must do in the proper time and in the proper setting that we are prohibited from doing when it's not the proper time and not the proper setting. Very famously in the blessing for Erusin, the beginning of the wedding ceremony, we remark that God gave us proper times when we can be with our beloveds, and there are things and people, there are times and then there are people when we should not be with our beloved, and that the same act can be right and wrong depending upon the circumstances that surround it. So perhaps the rabbis felt that doing the ritual of Eglah Arufah was simply wrong if it did not meet the Torah's conditions. If it was found near a border or a city whose majority of inhabitants were Gentiles, or a city in which there is no court, they would not break the heifer's neck. So here we're beginning to see a hint of what's going to come next week, which is that if you can be more certain that you are fairly confident that you know at least where the murderer came from, then there is less doubt with regards to the identity of the murderer. And any reduction of doubt seems to be sufficient for them to cancel the ceremony. So if it's near a border, then you assume that he was murdered by somebody who came across the border in a raid. If he was murdered near a city where the majority of the inhabitants are not Jews, in the days of the ancient world where people would kill each other for blood sport, you know, the fact that they might have murdered this person would be not that unbelievable. And likewise, if it is a Jewish city, but the city has no court, then what kind of lawless place must that be? The people who live there clearly would have no fear of the law. Questions? Okay. They only measure the distance from a city in which there is a court. If the corpse was found exactly between two cities, both of them bring 2 heifers between them, the words of Rabbi Eliezer. Jerusalem does not bring a heifer whose neck is to be broken. Jerusalem was considered to be outside of the lands that were given for inheritance, which we saw in our Deuteronomy quote, because Jerusalem was not given to any one tribe. And therefore, Jerusalem is exempt from participating in this ritual. Another city would be closer, even if it was right outside Jerusalem. All right, Mishnah 3.
What it means is Jerusalem was the only city that didn't participate, correct? That was exempt for participating in the ceremony.
Exactly, because it was the only city that was not part of a tribal allotment given to one tribe or another. And from the text that we saw in Deuteronomy, it specifically, the preamble specifically mentioned the land that we had inherited, that we had been apportioned. Jerusalem was not part of that land.
You know, Rabbi, I will be honest with you. I feel uneasy with this. I don't like it. And I will explain what. For me, it's not only metaphysics, as you say, or you do whenever you do, if not, what are the benefits for the town? But what about first, you can have benefit from the family of the murdered person. They need something that at least, someone take care or pay attention for what happened, let's do something. And also, I don't like that because for me, it's so important to take responsibility. And you are in charge of your city. So that's why we have the mitzvah since Abraham, that you need to work with the guests on the way and to be sure that the guys is almost in their house. So to be sure that they don't, nothing happened to them. It's your responsibility. Not only so much like, only on the land. That's it. Not anything else, not tree, not really on land. It's like, we try to wash our responsibilities to maintain justice and security for our people. And I have a problem with that.
So we're going to come back to the question of the overall responsibility of a town to its citizens and to others that are in the town. But I want to examine the hypothesis that doing it in one set of circumstances would yield a benefit, and doing it in the other, it should have been, because it would have had a benefit. So imagine one city, they measure, it fits the criteria, they break the neck, but the city still does not have a good police force, they are corrupt, they are not taking care of justice, but they do the ritual because it fits the criteria. But they do nothing to actually address why the person was murdered. They don't bother trying to hunt down the potential murderer. They don't bother providing additional guardians or additional support and resources to prevent additional murderers, but they do the ritual, right? City number 2, the body is found hanging from a tree, so they don't do the ritual. But they establish more guards, they put together a neighborhood watch, they are hunting for clues, they are putting out a bounty to find the murderer, they are consoling the family and helping them to survive without the help of whoever had died. Both cities did what the Mishnah said they should do, but only one of them is actually going to benefit from it, and it's not the one that did the ritual. Right? Doing the ritual by itself in a vacuum does very little. not doing the ritual, but doing the justice of a town doesn't hurt the town just because they didn't do the ritual. Right? The ritual is as the Torah described, and there is nothing wrong with doing the ritual when it is called for. But the rabbis, as we're going to see in just a few Mishnayot, are very quick to try and change our focus from the actual murderer, who is still guilty, to what the town itself is responsible for. So that, for them, is more important than the ritual in and of itself.
The only point that I disagree with all respect is that for me, ritual and ceremonies bring an educational value by itself. When you have a ceremony and ritual, you educate the population many values. For example, responsibility, care each other, whatever. Okay, so it's not like a ceremony like as something without any material, like anything. I forgot the word. Anything that there's not consistency, like something that without any value.
Right.
It's just another ceremony. That's it. Who cares? Let's do something else. No, sometimes ceremonies and acts bring educated people, because bring to your awareness. Okay, look what we are doing. Maybe that's why. Okay, we don't supposed to act different. Maybe we need to prevent for the future. Maybe it's a trigger to improve. So for me, the just ceremony that the rabbi tried to narrow, I look as a mistake. For me, every act and ceremony is education, potential education.
So if I find the rituals of Shabbat Friday night to be very educational, to be very spiritually moving, to help a family unite and stay together, does that mean that I can do those rituals with the blessings on Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, every night of the week? Can I do the Kiddush and use the exact same blessing? Can I do the candle lighting for Shabbat and use the exact same blessing on all the other nights? Because they're so educational, let's do them even when we're not required to do them.
Okay, good point.
Right, so there is a benefit to reserving rituals to only when they are appropriate. That's why our holidays happen on a calendar, not by convenience. Right, we're going to celebrate Hanukkah on the day of Hanukkah, even though it would be more convenient to wait until winter break and the kids were off school. But that's not when we do Hanukkah. Right, it's just not the appropriate time. And same for all of our other holidays, for most of our blessings that have a specific time or action that go along with it. While it is perfectly fine to study them or to learn about them at other times, to be reminded, to perform the ritual itself requires the setting and the time and everything else to be perfect for the ritual to have its desired effect educationally, even setting aside the metaphysical elements. And that discipline of doing a ritual when it's required and refraining from a ritual when it is not, in order not to either dilute or to act inappropriately, which it would be, by the way, doing all of the blessings at the inappropriate time for Shabbat, what we call a bracha levatala. That is an important thing to keep clear for ourselves. But it's hard, especially for the rituals we like, and especially for a ritual, as you rightly point out, in this case, that a family and a community might desperately want in order to bring a sense of closure, a sense of catharsis, a sense of some form of we're doing something about this. But the rabbis are holding back. Now we're going to talk about why they hold back here in even more depth next week, because we're going to see the second half of chapter 9, the conclusion of Mishnah Sotah is all about holding back. And that's going to be a big theme for our class next week. All right, Mishnah 3. Wait a minute. Yes, it is Mishnah 3. Sorry. If the head was found in one place and the body in another place, They bring the head to the body, the words of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Akiva says they bring the body to the head, right? We've got two different pieces of the person, God forbid. Which one do we measure from? Well, first, you have to reunite the body. But if you reunite it, that's going to change your measuring location. Where do we measure from? Or, sorry, what do we do then? Rabbi Eliezer says, the body is the majority of the person, bring the head to it. Rabbi Akiva, on the other hand, says the head, and as we're going to see in the next Mishnah as well, which is the source of breath, which is the gift of life, that is the key, bring the body to the head. And yes, Rabbi Akiva wins in this argument. And he's going to win in the next Mishnah as well. Let's go ahead and get that one up for discussion since it's a similar topic. From what part do they measure? Right now, we are really trying to be precise here. In general, I would have to imagine that the distance from a body to other cities is not going to be so close that we have to worry about which part of the body we're measuring from. We're down to inches at this point. But hypothetically, Rabbi Eliezer says from the navel, right, the belly button, the center of the body. Rabbi Akiva says from the nose, right, the place that has the nefesh, the ruach, the breath that was placed into us that actually creates our neshama. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says from the place where he was made a slain person, from the neck. Right? What is the most obvious weak point of the human body? The neck. And that is our most exposed, obvious, vulnerable part. That is where death happens. There is a very famous midrash about the story of Cain and Abel, that when Cain is trying to kill Abel, he doesn't know how, right? No one's ever murdered a person before. So where do you hit the body to make it stop working? And the midrash says that he tries all over until he gets to the neck, and now he's got a winner, and that he kills Abel at the neck as that weak point of the body. Rabbi Akiva wins this argument, that if you have to measure so precisely, you measure from the nose. Personally, I think, that's a nice reminder that the body may be a body, but the person is ultimately their soul. And the nose is the most symbolic location of the constant breath of life that is synonymous with our soul. It's very easy to treat a body just like a body rather than a person, because after all, the soul has left. But being reminded of the humanity of the deceased is very important. Mishnah 5. The elders of Jerusalem departed and went away. Right? They were the people measuring, remember. The elders of that city, the one that's designated as being the close one, bring a heifer which has never been worked, from our Deuteronomy passage, 21. And a blemish does not disqualify it. Right? The cow does not need to be perfectly blemish-free as though it were going to be sacrificed on the altar. The cow needs only be one that has never worked. This is different, of course, than the para aduma, the red heifer that is used for the special mixture of ashes for purifying people from coming in contact with the dead. They bring it down to a hard. This is our word etan that we had before, our nachal etan. And the term is etan is understood in its literal sense of hard. That you are trying to get to a scrabble, rough area. However, even if it is not literally hard, right, it is still valid for the ceremony. If it is still the nearest place that you have this nachal, this wadi, this river valley, you still go ahead and perform the ceremony in that place. They break the neck with a hatchet from behind. So they hit the neck from behind using an axe. And the site may never be sown or tilled, but it is permitted to comb flax and chisel rocks. So you are allowed minor incidental use of that space, but we are not allowed to actually grow and plow and use the land as we might otherwise do.
Why from behind?
Because this is not a kosher slaughter. This is not shchita, which comes from underneath and up. This is a very different ceremony. And by killing it this way, we're not allowed to use the meat because it's not a kosher slaughter. And of course, also practically, that hitting from the back is the way you are likely to kill the animal instantly. Whereas crushing from the front is not a death blow. Well, it will be a much more lingering death. Other questions on the ceremony so far? Okay. Mishnah 6, let's get it all up there. The elders of that city then wash their hands with water in the place where the heifer's neck was broken. And they say, our hands have not shed this blood, neither have our eyes seen it. Again, continuing the quote from Deuteronomy 21. But did we really think that the elders of a court of justice are shedders of blood? Right? Here we have the people that are most likely not to be murderers, we hope, and they are saying, we didn't do it. No one thought you did it, right? You are not the prime suspects. So why are they making this declaration? Rather, the intention of their statement is that the man found dead did not come to us for help, and we dismissed him without supplying him with food, and we did not see him and let him go without escort. Right? So to come back to the point you were making earlier, Natan, about the sense of responsibility the town feels. Right? Here there is a body in the middle of nowhere, and they are trying to declare that we did not fail this person. Right? If he came and asked for food, we would have provided it. If he came and needed an escort in order to be safe in journeying, we would have provided it. We did not see him, we did not know him, we did not fail in our duty to protect him. Now, there's a lot of commentary about this section found in the Torah as well as in Halakha about exactly who the dead man is. There are some who say that this is a person who went out and without an escort, he was murdered by bandits. There are others who say this is a person who went out and without proper supplies, he was desperate and was starving, and he attempted to rob another person. But that other person defended themselves, killed him, and left the body in the wilderness. So the person who was lying here dead may have actually tried to have been a robber, may have tried to have been an attacker. And yet still the people are saying, we did not fail our obligation. Again, as long as they can honestly say, we would have helped or we did help all that came to us. This is a very strong message that a city, a town, a community has to provide for those that are in need to prevent them from starving and to prevent them from turning to crime, and that it has to provide proper protection to make sure that the people that are coming in their town or merely traveling through are protected from those in the unsettled areas that might attack them if they are not escorted. This process of providing levaya, of an escort, is a very powerful command in Jewish communal life. Questions or comments on that section before we get to the Kohanim again? Okay. Then the priests exclaim, absolve, O Lord, your people Israel, whom you redeemed, and do not let guilt for the blood of the innocent remain among your people. That is to say, they did not need to say, and they will be absolved of blood guilt. Rather, the Holy Spirit announces to them, when you act in this way, the blood is forgiven you. Right? So there is this feeling of catharsis when this happens, when the town can honestly say that they know nothing about this, they did not fail in their duties, they did not fail to provide, that it is terrible that this happens, but it does happen. But in this case, again, if they can honestly claim all of this, they are not guilty. If they failed, then yes, they do share some measure of guilt. Obviously not that of the murderer, but they do share a very important portion of the guilt that should make them redouble their efforts to be a better community. Mishnah 7. Getting back to the question of who is the real murderer? If the murderer was discovered before the heifer's neck was broken, it goes free and grazes with the herd, right? So the heifer does not become consecrated the same way that an animal set aside for a korban, for a sacrifice at the altar, becomes consecrated. The animal is only special, according to later on discussion in the Gemara, once it goes down into that river valley. At that point, it is now set aside. But if you discover who the murderer is before the neck has been broken, the cow goes back to being a regular cow. But if the murderer is found after the heifer's neck was broken, it is buried in that place because it came there from the outset in connection with a matter of doubt, and atone for the doubt which is now gone. So they go ahead, they bury it, nothing else needs to be done. If the heifer's neck was broken and afterwards the murderer is discovered, behold, he is executed, right? So the murderer can't claim, hey, you guys already did a ritual that absolved the blood guilt, so I guess I'm off the hook. No. A murderer is a murderer is a murderer. And provided all the evidentiary requirements of the court have been met, he will be executed for the murder of that person. The act of breaking the neck of the heifer does not absolve the community of the need for justice against the criminal. This is not a get out of jail free card for the guy who committed the crime. Yes, Aaron?
Just out of curiosity, it's kind of tangent. At this point in time, wasn't these courts highly against the death penalty? And at this point in time, they make a point to mention, yeah, we do execute them in these situations.
Right. So again, it's a question of not are they pro or con death penalty. They were con the unjustified use of the death penalty. And so the evidentiary requirements were very high. But the rabbis never took the death penalty off the books. It is absolutely there, and in the correct circumstances, it is the correct way to deal with the convicted criminal. It's just the evidentiary requirements are very high. But they're making a point here that if all of the criteria are met, that he is executed, notwithstanding the fact that the heifer had already been killed, presumably because we thought that would clear the guilt for the community of the crime.
Right. I thought some of the rabbis went out of the way. Didn't Akiba actually say, if it was up to me, nobody would be executed?
So he made that statement not to claim that the death penalty itself was unjust or improper, but simply to point out that he felt it was not being applied always correctly. Oh. That with a more vigorous examination of the witnesses and the circumstances, that most people who were being executed probably, in his opinion, did not meet the evidentiary requirement for execution. But he never said the death penalty is wrong. He can't say that. It's in the Torah. But you can say it's not being carried out correctly. Indeed, that's an argument that comes up in the debates in America as well about the death penalty. About whether it is right or wrong is one question. Whether or not it is being carried out correctly, both in the court proceedings as well as the actual executions, those are second level of discussion. And back on the question of our trial.
Sorry, Rabbi, before we continue.
Yes.
So they buried the calf, or they leave the calf there on the field for the dogs and the birds?
No, they bury it.
They buried it.
Yes.
Why? I thought that if they wanted to show wastage of animal and material, living on the field is the most insulted thing that they could do.
No, they buried it in this circumstance, in Mishnah 7. Right? If the neck has been broken, but the rest of the ceremony isn't continued, then it's simply buried there.
Ah, okay, but if they broke the
If the full ceremony was done, it is
yes,
just left.
just left to the field to the dogs and the bears.
Left to nature, you might say.
Yes, okay.
All right. Mishnah 8, which is going to be our final Mishnah for tonight. If one witness says, I saw the murderer, and one witness says, you did not see him, or if a woman says, I saw him, and another woman says, you did not see him, they break its neck. So the question here is, if there is a little evidence about the murder, but there is also counter evidence to that little evidence, is that enough to say, don't do the ritual? Remember, we seem to be noticing that the rabbis are disinclined to do the ritual. So is the whisper, the hint of maybe evidence that there is a known murderer enough to discontinue the ritual in this moment, or not?
The
And
same
the
as
answer
the
is,
ceremony of the Sotah. Exactly the same.
it is very much the same way that we saw in Sotah. Excellent. And the answer here is also that if the evidence is basically balanced, because neither witness is sufficient, because in Judaism we need two witnesses, then we don't have enough to remove the doubt, and the execution takes place. Let me give you the second half, and then I'll take your question, Aaron. If one witness says, I saw him, the murderer, and two say, you did not see him, they break his neck, because two can cancel him out. If two say, we saw him, and one says to them, you did not see him, they do not break its neck, because now we have enough evidence to at least have a named person under suspicion, and even though there is one person countering it, one cannot cancel two. Yes, Eric?
Is this going to be, is this like an either or where the person either gets executed or the calf gets his neck broken? For instance, if the murderer is acquitted, does the calf or the cow automatically die?
No. The rabbis recognized that their rules for proving a person's guilt to the extent of a death penalty were very high, but they also recognized that some people were guilty of murder, even if they were not guilty to the degree that would require an execution. So once a person has been established as the murderer, even if they are, later found to not meet that strict standard of execution, the ceremony would not be performed.
So then there'd be, if he's acquitted though, then there's no atonement for the murder, right?
So again, as long as the process has been followed, then the justice that's been done is what's most important. Whether or not a particular ritual has been done or not seems for the rabbis to be less important. We're going to find out in Mishnah 9 and through the end that it can actually be negative to be going ahead and doing this in cases where justice can't be done. But that's a teaser for next week.
Have you already decided what is the next Mishnah? Because I need to try to organize.
So I haven't actually picked one myself. We talked about doing Yevamot for doing the Levirate marriage because we keep circling back again and again to that topic, and it's one that is not intuitive for most of us because we don't deal with Levirate marriage very often. But I would like to point out how we do handle it because it is still officially on the books. That is to say, in modern Jewish circumstances, if a situation arose where a woman came to me and said that her first husband had died and that he had a brother and her first husband and she had no children, we would have to handle the situation. We would not ignore it. How we will handle it, I'll leave as a teaser for when we study that.
So
Hey,
we
Rabbi.
studied Yevamot, that's the name?
Yes.
For the Levirate marriage, do you have to have no children, or if you have a daughter, do you still do it?
Let's save that for when we study the Mishnah.
Oh.
All right, so we're going to leave Mishnah Sotah here. We're going to finish up with the last few Mishnayot next week, and I apologize for the fact that it's going to be shorter next week. But since it's Hanukkah, that's okay. That's all right. But it may go longer than you think because the topics in the last few Mishnayot are very very powerful ones and very interesting, and still have certain questions and relevance for our own day. So it's a very interesting thematic conclusion to the entire Mishnah. With that, I'm going to wish everyone a Hanukkah Sameach. Have a great Hanukkah, and I will see you for Mishnah next Wednesday night, same time.
About tomorrow, Rabbi, will you send the link? The community will send the link for every evening.
It should have gone out. I scheduled it to go out during the class, but I haven't checked my email to see if the software worked. Let me double check. And as I bring up my inbox, yes, the email went out for the Temple Israel Zoom Hanukkah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Don't thank me. Thank the good people at MailChimp.
Have a great evening. Yes,
And if I don't get it, can I send you an email so you can send me the link?
Do you not get emails from Temple Israel?
Sometimes I don't get the email from Temple Israel.
All right, we'll send a reminder through WhatsApp as well then.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate
And
it.
it is also on Facebook as well. So we'll send it through WhatsApp too. All right. Good night, everyone. Hanukkah.
Thank you.
Good night.